The riddle of steel.
Yes. You know what it is, don't you, boy? Shall I tell you?
D&D, like the books that inspired it, like a good movie, is based upon a struggle. Though on the surface, many will say that D&D has to do with collecting treasures or exploration or whatever. It's really a struggle. Beneath the surface, a struggle between life and death. And having a struggle is something that as humans we connect with very deeply, because life itself is a struggle. And that edge, that gaming, that sense of danger, element of danger in the campaign, something very important, particularly in an old school campaign. One way of holding on to this realism is basically where you get your inspirations from. If you get any inspiration from the classic books that inspired D&D itself, it is a great place. It has its logic. It's rooted in a bit of reality. There are consequences to your actions. I say this because it stands in contrast to something like, say, a video game. If you're taking the inspiration from video game, well, video games, they're just an entirely different platform, and the program can only do so much that it doesn't really encapsulate all of life's consequences for all the things that you do. And so you stand in front of someone with a dagger, you could stab them, 20 times, and the person would just be standing there like in a video game. It's just got no basis on reality. So that's just not the way to go. The same with a lot of modern movies also kind of seems to have lost that. Obviously, it's fantasy, but you got to have at least a background of logic or realism to ground everything. There's a lot of modern movies and video games, of course, by nature, that don't have that. So you got to turn to the older movies. You look at the movies with the good guys, the protagonists rather. They got their ass kicked, and they kicked ass, and well, it was two-way back and forth. And you connected to it. It was gritty. It was grounded. And that's what a good campaign needs. There was a discussion I had with a younger gamer, and it was really something that was a bit of an eye-opener with how the game could be, how the interpretation of the game can change between generations of gamers, old school versus new school. Something as simple as a dagger. He couldn't wrap his mind around the concept that a dagger could kill you with one shot. Of course, he's thinking your character could have certain amount of hit points, and the dagger just inflicts 1d4 hit points, so it couldn't just kill you outright, because I guess he's thinking of a video game. The dagger just takes a tiny little chip off your life block or whatever, your life meter. So he couldn't understand that. I'm just saying, it's just physics, it's just reality. Someone stabs you with a knife in just the right spot, you're down for the count. That's all that it is. Again, I was thinking about reality, and also, again, just applying realism to it. Just applying a little bit of realism to the game. It's just logical. Of course, if you're playing a game, if you're in a version of D&D where it doesn't run that way, that's not going to click. But that's not old school. Old school is about the gritty survival, life and death survival. A single die roll, you can possibly die. And that's one way of keeping the game grounded in realism. Now, of course, we're referring here to the good old critical hit table. That's how someone could get killed with one dagger. Traditionally, the critical hit means you roll a natural 20. You roll a natural 20 without any modifiers, just straight off the die. And you roll random results, usually in percentile, meaning the wounds will be more grievous than they normally would be, with the possibility of death. And having said that, that is one thing that really becomes an equalizer. And it really keeps characters, high-level characters, from really becoming too cocky. Because they're not impervious, they're high level, yes, they're very skilled at what they do, but they're not immortal, they're not impervious, they're not invulnerable. And so otherwise, characters could just come in through any village and just have their way and take over anything and pretty become invincible, like gods in their own world, and that is totally against what the game is about. So you have things like the critical hit to keep things in balance, keep this in check. You can imagine a high-level character being arrogant and challenging a low-level, and nobody, a beggar of the street, to take his best shot at him with a dagger. What happens if that beggar rolls a 20? What happens if he rolls, I don't know, 98%? That guy's down for the count, because he was just, at the end of the day, he was just a flesh and blood man. And that's what this represents. Flesh and blood man got stabbed in the wrong place, and he's down for the count. And that's the groundedness I am talking about. Other things, just having realistic limitations to things, such as levels. Levels can only go so high because you're mortal beings, you're flesh and blood human beings. You can only go so much. You know, in reality, if there were no limitations, people like Michael Jordan would be jumping 40, 50 feet, 100 feet into the air now. So the cool thing about the game is to maintain that element of danger. Just using a sense of logic. Using another comparison to that would be like the rule for falling, which is an old official rule. You take 1d6 points of damage for every 10 feet that you fall. You fall 30 feet, 3d6 points of damage. It's a simple rule, it's elegant, straight to the point. It gets the job done, it has its logic. It doesn't try to go deep into physics and velocity and whatnot, because we're not trying to be complicated. We're trying to just enough to get by. We're not trying to be perfect. It's not trying to be a perfect simulation. And so realism is not really the focus of the game, but it's a very important element in terms of keeping things grounded in that gritty medieval tone. There has to be consequences of things that happen. If the characters go through a desert, it's got to feel, it's got to go through a desert. You're going through a very hostile place. It's not a walk in the park. In a video game, it will be a walk in the park, because unless a program has been made to respond to that. But usually it doesn't. It's just a change of scenery and that's it. So yeah, that's a very important thing. Just keeping characters mortal. If your characters go from encounter to encounter with just barely taking a scratch, that's a problem. Unless you're throwing at them exceptionally weak monsters, there's just a problem. Another aspect of injecting realism into the game is your views upon magic. If magic is overabundant, then it ceases to be something special. And it basically becomes something that really pampers the players, which is, I believe, what happened in a previous edition with some sort of healing thing that everybody was able to get, and something magical. Magic, in this sort of campaign, magic should be something that's more restrained. It should be special. It should be magic. Essentially, you got to think about, you're in medieval Europe, and superstition is real. It isn't rampant. They're not mages, a dime a dozen, and all your neighbors across the lane are spellcasters. No. There's a few spellcasters. It's something just rare. It's something that you hardly see. And that makes magic more special when it does happen. Makes it more miraculous. But it isn't your everyday, because when every day just becomes mundane, it becomes bland, it becomes part of the landscape. And on top of that, it keeps things in check. So low magic is better than high magic. Otherwise, all those things that were part of the hardship of a medieval world would disappear. If magic would be perfect and miraculous and part of the everyday world, no one would need to fear disease or war or famine or any of those sorts of things, which are an important part of the medieval theme. And not only that, but it'll take the struggle out of everything, which is the whole point in injecting realism. Obviously, yeah, magic is a rule break in terms of physics, and yeah, you could do the miraculous with magic, but it has to be constrained. It has to be restrained. Well, these are just bits of philosophies behind the themes of the game. Even though I mentioned a couple little system rules here and there, I'll get into streamlining things very soon. But it's just a layout of the philosophy of what it means to have a medieval campaign within this certain components. Just an example. But that's what it all boils down to, injecting that bit of realism. Not too much. You don't want to complicate a game. I mean, we don't want to have the streamlining aspect. Ultimately, it's up to the DM to see how he interprets the rules, particularly when they're laid down and bare, which is, again, the good thing. The DM can interpret it how he wants. If he doesn't want it to be so much medieval, it's all up to him. So it is a good guideline. Hopefully this will serve useful in your campaign. It's up to you how much. It's a good thing about having bare bones rules. You could tweak them however you want. How grim or how magic light or how magic heavy you want to have the campaign. And so you want to always have the challenge, because you want to have heroes, not gods. Let realism be your ally, but not your dictator. Be realistic, but be sensible. Keep magic low, not high. Let magic be something special. When a magic item is found, when a spell is cast, it is something unusual, miraculous, and special. Because the name of a game is survival of life and death. So follow these ways. Remember to always get medieval on your players.
Contemplate this on the tree of woe.